Welcome, everybody, to this webinar. It's about using Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect for business modeling. And our trainer and expert today is JD Baker. I am your moderator, Loriana Zanotti. I'm the program executive at EA Principles. This webinar is sponsored by EA Principles Incorporated. Our website is www.eaprinciples.com. And this webinar is the first in a series that will provide insight into how to create business-focused models in Enterprise Architect. EA Principles is a global leader in enterprise architecture, training, and consulting. We are a gold member of the Open Group and co-sponsor of the Archimate certification program. Clients include major U.S. government agencies, private companies, Fortune 500 companies, and over 5,000 individual EA professionals. EA Principles can assist in complex strategic planning, project management, portfolio management, and service-oriented architecture initiatives. We offer accredited courses in TOGAF, Archimate, IT for IT, and many other subjects. Our experts in enterprise architecture have helped author several key documents and have an average of 15 or more years of training experience each. Our expert trainer today is JD Baker, and he's got a rich background of experience, including being a software systems engineer with expertise in enterprise architecture, requirements development, software system architecture, and system design processes and methodologies that support model-based engineering. He is a consultant for model-based analysis and development using Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect. JD is also a board member representing Sparx Systems for the Object Management Group.
I have two objectives in this webinar. One of them is to kind of give you an overview of what is Sparx Enterprise Architect for those of you that are not familiar with it. And then the primary objective, of course, is to talk about some of the ways that we can do business-focused modeling in Enterprise Architect. There are a number of organizations and standards that address this area. Some of them are starting to kind of come together and figure out how they might work together. And so we'll talk about the BABOK, the IIBA Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. We'll talk specifically about the OMG standard for business process modeling called BPMN. We'll take a look at the newest and, as I've said before, the least mature of these, which is the BizBoK UML profile. Not that the BizBoK is particularly immature, but the work that's being done on the UML profile is being characterized as version 0.3, so it still has a ways to go. And then finally, we'll talk about business rules modeling using SBVR, the Semantics of Business Vocabulary and Rules, which is again another OMG standard. All right. So Enterprise Architect at its core is a unified modeling language modeling tool. So UML is the core language. It's based on, of course, that open standard from the Object Management Group, and has utilized the features of UML for profiling, and the features of the language to produce a number of different standards related to a variety of modeling characteristics. So BPMN, the SysML, which is the OMG systems modeling language, and down across the bottom of the slide, you see three different enterprise architecture frameworks. The unified profile for DODAF and MODAF, which is being in essence replaced by something called the Unified Architecture Framework. Both of those are standards, again, from OMG. The Zachman Framework, which there is an implementation of the Zachman Framework in an Enterprise Architect, but that, of course, is John Zachman's single focus and not an international standard in any way, but an international, well understood standard, even though no standards body has addressed it. And then finally, on the right hand side, there is TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, which there is an implementation in Enterprise Architect, and of course is a focus also of the training that's being done by EA principals. So these customizations are in part part of a standard. So, for example, BPMN is indeed a standard. SBVR for the business rule model is a standard. Other standards from other organizations, for example, there is an implementation of Archimate in Enterprise Architect, and Archimate is a language for describing enterprise architectures. And again is a course offering from EA Principles. But there are other things in there as well. So, for example, data flow models, data flow diagrams are popular ways to describe things, but certainly not part of a standard that I'm aware of. Other things that are not being shown in this list, you see the list is about a third visible here. Things like mind mapping, right? So other ways that we can build this. But the really interesting part for me is we can utilize this MDG technology builder to create our own profiles and create our own domain-specific models, and extend UML in this UML modeling tool to to have our own domain-specific modeling language, and has been done in a number of places and situations. So Enterprise Architect has, out of the box, the ability to, or the ability, but that the only storage mechanism that Enterprise Architect has is a relational database. And so out of the box, that is is an EAP or an FEAP. EAP is an access database. FEAP is a Firebird database. But you can also host this on more robust database management systems. What that means is that all of the clients can be accessing the same model. Even if the model is stored on a file system and you're using EAPs, you can still have multiple people accessing the same model, so that changes are tracked close to instantly. Other DBMSs such as SQL Server or MySQL and Oracle and a number of others are also supported. The client itself runs on multiple platforms. So it is a Windows native application. However, it runs on Mac or on Linux, and is tested with two different emulation kinds of tools. CodeWeavers has a product called Crossover, and then there is Wine. EA clients are tested with both of those products, and Sparx has recently improved their operations on both Mac and Linux, and so we don't have to worry about, will it run on my platform? The answer is yes, it will. All right. The product family that we have for Enterprise Architect starts with a limited useful desktop edition and starts to grow there. There is a professional edition and a corporate edition. So the corporate edition is basically where most companies choose to start. The professional edition is useful for single consultant kinds of operations, but the corporate edition adds a number of things, including the ability to connect to that DBMS, etc. The Business and Software Engineering Edition adds more capability. The Systems Engineering Edition adds a different set of capability. And then the Ultimate Edition is basically everything that Sparx builds, you are licensed for. And in today's demo, I am using the Ultimate Edition. And the latest version of Enterprise Architect is version 13.5, build 13.5.1. So the way Sparx tracks their updates and bug fixes and et cetera, small stuff increments the build. Larger stuff increments either the version number to the right of the decimal point in some cases and to the left of the decimal point in some cases. The Sparx track record has been a new version about every 12 to 14 months. So what is it? It's that platform that accelerates all kinds of different kind of modeling, including software, business, and systems development. It is a quality tool, so it wins awards. It has an installed base of over 350,000 licenses worldwide. There are a large number of partners, one of which is EA Principles, and so it is well supported throughout the world in many different guises. And so it is a full-featured tool suite. I hope to offer you some of the information and some of the ways that it works for business modeling here today, and we'll see how this goes. I got this list of why should I model things um, from a business perspective, from a book by David Bridgeland and Ron Zahavi called Business Modeling. Right? And there is business value to be gained from modeling, and they point out that a single business model can be valuable in multiple different categories, but that these are the basic categories, the basic reasons why you might want to model something, including communication between different sets of stakeholders. I worked for a company at one point in time where we were very focused on creating visualizations so that people would, you could walk through them. And in many cases, the situation was, well, no, the process doesn't work that way. And we were able to identify holes and gaps and other kinds of issues through those visualizations. Of course, if I'm the new guy on the block and I need some training, I need to learn how things are. A lot of times that visualization will help as well. Uh, Assuming that I understand the context of the model and the syntax of the modeling language, et cetera. And then there's other, I can be more persuasive with pictures quite often, analyze various business situations, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a number of reasons why I might choose to do the modeling from a business architecture, business analysis, business rules perspective, and these are a fairly good collation of what value you get from modeling things from a business perspective. But not always is it necessary to model. So I get asked this question a lot of, well, when should I model and when should I not? This list was derived from a software modeling article and what have you, but it applies to the business process as well, which is to say that if I understand the problem domain, all right, and my solution is easy to construct, and I don't have to communicate or collaborate with a lot of other people, then maybe I don't really need a model. Maybe I can just break into building that solution, whatever that happens to be. And then the notion is as well, if I don't have a model or an architecture or a business architecture, et cetera, ongoing maintenance could be a problem. But if there's not going to be much ongoing maintenance, then I don't need one of those either. And so the problem is that often we think that it's going to be easy, or we think it's going to be minimal maintenance, or we think it's going to be limited in its growth, and then there's changes. So people model things that are complex in order to manage the complexity and to understand the risks associated with the things that we've got, the complexity that we've got. So this is an important thing for us to understand as we build our models. What do I want to actually communicate? What do I need to understand in my problem space and in my business space? I need to be able to trace. In many cases, our regulators want us to be able to say, "Well, here's the requirement. You know, where is it built in your system?" And being able to do that effectively, efficiently is also quite useful. And then, of course, you know, models give us that higher level of abstraction that will, in effect, make us more agile because we're able to address things at that higher level of abstraction. So, to get into the four topics, the first topic here is the International Institute of Business Analysis and their partnership with Sparx Systems. Right? So in that partnership, Sparx has provided two things. The first thing is a reference model for the BABOK. So the BABOK is a rather large document with a lot of techniques and suggestions and et cetera for the business analysts to be able to do a good job of analyzing business needs, and so what the BABOK does not offer are perhaps examples of good examples of how things might be implemented in a tool, because their document is indeed um, tool agnostic. Right? And so what we're trying to do with the Sparx reference model is say, here's the various topics in the BABOK, and here's some reference implementation kinds of information, and an example of a model organization. So the BABOK reference model is available to anyone. It uses a new product from Sparx called WebEA. So all you need is a browser to be able to log on to that, and I'm going to show you here in a few minutes what it looks like, how to get to it, and how to review how that might help you in developing business analysis reference models. The second offering from Sparx is an MDG technology. Now, MDG stands for model-driven generation, and it's essentially a branding for a customization or extension of the modeling environment in Sparx Enterprise Architect. So the MDG technology that you can access supports all of the models that are described in the BABOK. Now, I've got a link down there. You don't have to remember it. I will show you how to easily find that. But these slides, I think Loriana and I have decided that I'm going to provide these to her so that along with the recording of the webinar, you will be able to access the slides as well, so that you don't have to be furiously writing down the BABOK-guide-v3-tutorials kind of URL information. Okay. Now, one of the key elements of the BABOK, all right, is and are business process models. And business process is a large part of what we often want to be able to do, what we often need to be able to understand as we start a new product, as we start a new effort or revise an effort or whatever. So the Object Management Group has published a standard, a specification called BPMN. I think the current version is 2.02, and Sparx Enterprise Architect implements that specification, and I believe is to my knowledge, is the only UML modeling tool that does implement that specification. Now, that means I can use business process models along with my other architecture models in the same tool. All right, so a lot of those other the things that we have for the BABOK, for example, one of their models is state machines. Okay, we can trace and utilize the state machine models in the same tool as we do the BPMN. Create relationships as necessary in order to be able to trace requirements, etc. The Sparx works with not only the OMG for maintaining the specification, but also works with a group called the Model Interchange Working Group. All right. What the Model Interchange Working Group does is define tests for compliant modeling tools to ensure that their implementation is compliant and to address issues, quite frankly, with the specification in addition to the modeling tools. There have been a number of live demonstrations that various vendors have participated in. The URL on this slide is a reference to one that I participated in with the rest of the BPMN Model Interchange Working Group, and we basically created part of a model and handed it off to the next modeling tool. And if I remember correctly, it was something like 11 vendors and 13 different tools. So a number of qualification kinds of information to know that we are doing things the right way. And I'll jump out to YouTube and we'll take a look at that. If you will, as I said, the least mature effort from an enterprise architect perspective, from a business modeling perspective, is the BizBoK. So Sparx Systems North America is leading the development of the UML profile for business architecture. That profile will be publicly available when it is finished, but those people that are interested now need to be members of the Business Architecture Guild. The Business Architecture Guild is entirely a member-driven organization, and so it has a lot of different things that you can get involved with. They have a newly launched career section where you can post resumes and try and find people that have jobs and do other kinds of things in the business architecture realm, as well as ways to get on board and help with the various working groups that they've got here. But what I find to be even more interesting, right, and I guess because I'm a longtime member of the Object Management Group, is that the Business Architecture Guild representatives have worked with other members of the Business Modeling Integration Task Force at the OMG to issue a request for proposal that is a first step in creating a full-scale business architecture modeling language, if you will. Their initial focus is capability and making sure that everybody has a single definition of capability and various kinds of modeling aspects. Although the RFP says capability is mandatory, but there are some other non-mandatory kinds of things that would be good to include kind of information. So it depends in large part on the maturity of the various submission teams. An initial submission has not been delivered yet, but I know there are at least two different groups working on a response to that RFP. So we'll be able to standardize then, a UML profile for business architecture for the world to see. Those of you that are interested in and learning more about the Business Architecture Guild, it's simply businessarchitectureguild.org and takes you to the homepage. The final thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about was the semantics for business vocabulary and rules. This is actually a relatively mature standard. As you can see, it's in version 1.4. And again, it's another standard from the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force at the Object Management Group, and its goal is to make the semantics, not just the syntax, but the semantics of the rules be explicit. And so what I will show you once we get into the modeling tool is how Enterprise Architect works to implement that. All right, speaking of getting into Enterprise Architect, right, so we've got a couple of different things that I want to do for demos. So the first thing that I wanted to address was if you do not have a license for Enterprise Architect, it is easy to get a 30-day evaluation. All you have to do is go to the homepage, sparxsystems.com, and simply download the trial version. Unlike other products, the trial version is actually a slightly different piece of software than the licensed version. So the first step in installing a licensed version is uninstall the trial. But also, unlike other products, the trial version has no modeling limitations. The only limitations for the trial are that any documents you produce or print from the model will have a Sparx Systems watermark on them. All right, so some sort of EA trial or words to that effect. But basically, you can have as many items as you want with with all of the various kinds of information. There's no limits to the models that you can create, and the models that you create in a trial version are fully accessible by the licensed version. So you don't lose anything when you make that transition. One of the things that Sparx does is they provide an awful lot of resources for people that use this tool. This tool is, quite frankly, has a lot of features and takes some skill or some time getting used to those kinds of things. So there's a number of different kinds of resources. One of those resources is this tutorial for getting started for the BABOK. And so, as I told you, the reference model for the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge is freely available. Now, it doesn't include all of the text of the BABOK, and IIBA sells that in a number of different formats it's not very expensive. If you join the IIBA, you can download the book for free. But the reference model is available to you whether you're a member or not at no cost. So it's simply a question of go here to this page, and the way I find this page all the time is I just type BABOK in the search window and go to there. Although you can navigate through resources to tutorials to find it. And so there's a URL for you to go to log in. The access code for the model is simply babok.model, and it opens this reference for you. So I'll go straight there. Yes, we will log in again. Simply select BABOK and BABOK. So if you look at the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, you find that the first two chapters are basically overview kinds of information, good information, but not necessarily modeling information. So what you see here, and I hope you can see it, is chapters 3 through 8 which have all of the various kinds of things that you might want to do as a business analyst in creating business models. Right? Each one of these, and so we're looking right now at not a web page. We are actually looking uh, at a model. Right? So it is it's a model that we can navigate. It's a model that we can look at, and so there are information. You know, what's the purpose of this particular trace requirements um, uh, process in that particular thing? What techniques should we use? And so, anytime you see the little Sparx logo, you know that we're going to get to a Sparx model. And so there's some options for what you might choose to do, and the way that you might choose to do them. And indeed, in this case, there's options for the business process model in BPMN, or one in as a UML activity diagram. So, a number of different ways that we can do that, and then we can go look at an example and say, okay, here's the example model for order management, and some text about it, etc. So in each case, all right, as I work through these things, I get to do things like learning more. I can go off to now. Notice that we've jumped out of um, the Baybock reference and gone to a set of information about the various things I can do in Enterprise Architect, gone back to the EA help files, etc. All right, so all of these learn more, and notice that we can even go to an Archimate process diagram, etc. We can go back to the tracing requirements. Uh, we can look at functional decomposition, and again, look at example links for feature hierarchies, etc. So this will, if you are familiar with the Baybock, then this gives you the idea of how do I create all these models, and what do they look like, and some information about the various elements uh, that might be a part of my models and a part of my business analysis kinds of things. So we can look at uh, all of the various sections of the Baybock, and I'll get back there sooner or later. All right, and including requirements analysis, strategy analysis, analyze current state. Uh, that's going to take me to a bunch of different techniques, and various kinds of analysis techniques, etc., and a lot of different kinds of information, a lot of different ways that you can do this. All right, so what I'm saying to you is not that you need to do every one of these things in order to analyze the current state, but you have a number of options for what kinds of models you want to create when you're analyzing that current state. This is the URL or the YouTube video for that capability demonstration that I mentioned earlier. And I wanted to get to, Denis will show us a slide here in a minute that has all of the various vendors on it, just to show you that, yes, we were indeed there and a part of what's going on. You can, again, if you search YouTube for BPMN interchange demo, then you can see what kinds of things that the various BPMN vendors are attempting to prove. I wasn't involved in the latest one, which was just a couple of months ago, but we will be back, when we do this again in 2018. So we'll do that. And then finally, some information about the Business Architecture Guild. There's their, you go home. There's, the introduction to the BizBach guide, etc., and some information about the organization itself, and other kinds of things that you might wish to to do. Here's a link to the Career Center that we just talked about. So, all right, I'm not here to advertise the guild, but you should know about that. Okay, so this is Enterprise Architect for those of you that have never seen it. I have a bunch of models that I have here. And so I mentioned the MDG technologies. All right. And so we look here and we've got an implementation for BABOK, the BizBoK guide, Archimate if we decide to do that, our business rule model, and BPMN 2.0, along with a number of other kinds of things that you might be interested in, including a user interface and wireframe kinds of models, and even some things in the wireframe for doing mobile applications and mobile things. So we've done that, all right. And so I first want to show you that. Oops, get over there, you. All right. That here I've got what EA calls a model root node, and if I add a model using a wizard, okay, I find three different things that I can add with respect to the BABOK. Okay, we can add things for the standard framework, and so there's a notion of a single initiative or an overall enterprise grouping, that will include multiple initiatives. Okay, there are these are the from the appendix of the BABOK, all of the different kinds of techniques and patterns and models and mind mapping and brainstorming and state modeling and sequence diagrams and a lot of other information that's here. And using the capabilities of Enterprise Architect in order to create those various kinds of things. And then finally, and I selected two, process modeling and process analysis. And so you'll see them over here. That's the way I created these two views in the model. And then finally, the BABOK standard documents are just a list of documents that have standard content, and Enterprise Architect will then support the production of those documents by placing the various kinds of suggested content as a part of those documents. So three different ways to leverage the information in the BABOK here in the creation of the models. So one of those ways, okay, is through process modeling. So I selected a technique for process modeling. What you get when you do that is a real abstract suggestion for what does a business process model look like, and what kinds of things can I model using Enterprise Architect. The one thing that they show that's in fact quite useful is the fact that this is a sub-process. Okay, it is a BPMN sub-process. So when I double click on this, it takes me to the sub-process. Okay, and lo and behold, that my sub-process has a number of activities in it, and one of those is indeed another sub-process. Right, so I can have multiple levels, and if you look at it in the project browser, you find that I have 1, 2, 3 different diagrams owned by the various activities that they are, and I can navigate those through simple clicks, so that I have the various kinds of ways that these kinds of things happen, or I don't have to have a real complex diagram. I can have a diagram that has a high-level overview, and then decompose that in my process model. And so here is the same process model that we saw in the WebEA presentation. Okay, and and in each case, okay, these are start events, so it has a label, tells me what they are. Uh, I'll just open this one up. So here's an activity, and so one of the things about BPMN is they don't have a way to describe necessarily what the the steps of an activity are or something like that in the spec, but we can certainly capture that um, in Enterprise Architect, and so we can do whatever description we need of the activity. So it's there. There's a number of BPMN2 specific sets of attributes. So this is one of those deals where uh, you got to kind of dig around in the spec or get some training or do something to understand what all of the various kinds of information are that you can track about these things. Right? Oh, sure. You go ahead and save. And so this is kind of a high level. We haven't allocated any responsibilities to the uses of pools and lanes, but it's here. It has a couple of different kinds of messages. An end event that is a message, a beginning event, a start event that's a message, etc. A couple of different kinds of gateways, and Enterprise Architect can model all of those kinds of things, including the creation of, as you can see in the toolbox, pools and lanes. So the toolbox is something that we ought to spend a few seconds looking at here, and that is that this is the BPMN 2.0 business process toolbox. All right, because this is a business process diagram. All right, if I open a different kind of diagram, okay, so, for example, this is a how you might do this in UML, which is not what I recommend, but it is possible. All right, if I open a UML activity diagram, I get a different set of tools that are available to me because these are the things that Enterprise Architect expects you to put on one of these kinds of diagrams. All right, so we don't have to go slogging through all of the various kinds of elements that I might put on a diagram. I get a list of things that are relevant to the kinds of diagrams that I'm creating here. And so this is my business process model, which can be a part of the BABOK modeling kinds of things. Skipping over to the um, or moving right along, I guess, to the BizBock. Okay, I want to show you that if I say add a model, there's no wizard yet. Like I say, this is still version 0.3, so there's no wizards for doing that thing. But we do have, as a part of the BizBock, 4 different groupings of diagram types. So we've got some things that are relative to capabilities, some things that are part of the information modeling area, our organizational cross mappings and organizational maps, and value mappings. All right, and when we add one of these capability maps, so it comes with some divisions or some swim lanes for us. It comes with a very small set of so far tools that we would use to model the various kinds of capabilities. This assumes that you have some familiarity with the BizBock, that you understand what its various kinds of modeling approaches are for doing this, and eventually will be something that's a part of the OMG specification as we do that. So each diagram has its own various kinds of things. Stakeholders are very simply stakeholders in UML are very modeled quite the same way. value streams and value propositions, etc. The different kinds of information that you might expect to see in the BizBot. We continue, the Sparx North America guys continue to drive the this development of this profile. It is currently out for review, a kind of a stage review. So people will be commenting on this, and we will understand where we might need to change and what we need to add, and we'll continue to go through the business architecture book of knowledge to do those kinds of things. The last element that I wanted to talk about was the notion of business rules. Right? So this is a business rule model, okay, and it has two parts. It has the business domain, and then the rules that apply to that kind of domain. So if you look at a business domain model, it is quite simply a class model with mostly the various kinds of attributes that are applicable to the various kinds of elements. This gives us the business vocabulary. Right? What are the terms? What are the facts? What kinds of things can we use to model those business rules? Right? And so we can add information such as, a one-to-many kind of situation where my rental system has many cars, but I have to have at least one, etc. So when we get into the business rules themselves, okay, we can do a number of things. Right? We can say that I have a rule task, right? And a rule task says, what do I need to do, and then what rules do I need to apply to that? So we have applied 3 rules to the determine eligibility rule task. We have provided 4 rules that are applicable to determine rent payable. I'm going to go look at these in a tool called Rule Composer. Okay, that's a part of our business modeling edition, as well as the Ultimate edition. All right, and so what we see here, there are 4 rules. Okay, 3 of which are applied here in the form of a decision table. All right, so I'm looking at something that's specific to my description of what is a car. A car has a type. Okay, there are 3 allowable values for my car type. All right, so my business vocabulary is now driving the selection of the application of my rules. All right, and so the outcome, the actions that are here, are if I select small, I pay 80. If I select AWD, I pay 100. If I select luxury, I pay 150. But these are only 3 of the 4 rules. Now notice that the 4th rule has to do with how do I calculate rent, right? So in addition to the decision table rules, okay, there is a computation table rule. So that 4th rule is applied to in a computation rule table. I have the formula that says that, and then the rule binding of why does this what makes this true. And again, if I come up here to rent, I expect to find rent payable, right? A value that says here are the things that I'm going to do, and I'm going to calculate that by rent per day times number of days rent. So I've got all of that information is calculated or captured as part of my my rent topic in Enterprise Architect. So I have ways to compose those rules, ways to identify those rules, and then apply a subset of the rules to various rule tasks that are a part of that. And there is, of course, like everything else, more information to be gleaned from that. So those are the four things that that I wanted to talk to you today about in terms of modeling, various business artifacts and creating business models. I would entertain questions at this point in time. So in general, okay, like anything else, when you talk about how does it connect, your model is organized typically in a TOGAF kind of way, and you're using Archimate or something else to do the models that are described by the ADM. I would say that at an enterprise architecture level, then there's a number of things that we can do as we drive down from the enterprise architecture into BPMN. There's actually some discussions that have been going on about how does the single business process described in Archimate relate to BPMN, and of course there's some harmonization that needs to go on there as well. So that would be worthwhile, I believe, in trying to develop a discussion about that. And so the question asks about does EA support DMN? So from a decision table perspective, yes. So there's two parts to the DMN specification. One is the graphical modeling language, and one is the decision tables. We support the decision tables, but at this point in time, we are and are not do not currently support the graphical modeling notation. Okay, I have to confess I don't know what PMML is, and the business rule composer is in the business rules MDG technology. So if you're looking for that, okay, it's on the configure ribbon, manage technologies, and then business rule model. Now, this is not available in the corporate edition. All right. The rule composer is only available in the business and software edition or the ultimate edition. So whoever asked about support for PMML, could you spell that out for me?
It looks like someone just wrote predictive model markup language.
Let me put it this way. I don't know what the roadmap is for support for DMN, but I will. I'll make it a question to ask of the folks in Australia. All right, you are all very much welcome.
Thank you for attending. We're very lucky to have JD providing this webinar for us, so thank you, JD, as well.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you next time.